So this is one of my bugbears a little bit, but no, that's fine. We'll just carry on. So I love this passage. This is a passage by Banchieri, beginning of the 17th century. It's describing what seems to be a pretty wild approach to singing on the book, to improvised counterpoint. And I'll just read it out. So in Rome, at the Cappella di Notre Signore, isn't it? Whatever, in the Holy House of Loreto and in countless other chapels, while singing improvised alamente counterpoint above the bass, nobody does that which his partner sings, but everyone, with certain observations conferred among them, creates a very delightful sound. This is a general custom. Let 100 different voices sing, as it were, consonantly above the bass, everything in accordance, and those few bad fifths and octaves, strangenesses and dissonances are all the graces which make the true effect of improvised alamente counterpoint. So this is a great passage. The idea that the dissonances are all the things that make the true effect of improvised counterpoint.
What is he describing? I mean, is this a daily occurrence in in the?
If it's somehow it's almost a slightly conflicting passage, because I think it's describing somehow two different things. It starts off by talking about, well, first of all, the basic premise is that everybody is singing on the Cantus Firmus, sort of like we saw with that example from Marchand in the 18th century, the Gaudeamus. And he then goes on to describe that there are certain observations conferred among the singers. This suggests some sort of model. So I think if you go to the next slide, or maybe 2 slides on, or maybe three slides on, you'll see one more. That one. You'll see quite a typical model from this period, which is to have the upper voice moving in tenths. Yeah, there we are. With the lowest voice, and the middle voice moving essentially in contrary motion. So this perhaps seems to be the sort of thing he might be discussing when he talks about these observations conferred amongst them. But then he continues to say, first of all, that there are 100 people doing this. Now, presumably that is a little bit of an exaggeration, maybe not. But also that the dissonances and the strange fifths and the strange octaves are what make the grace and sweetness of improvised counterpoint. Now, this sort of model is very widespread in conversations about improvised counterpoint today. The idea that basically with a few tricks, you can quite simply create something that's contrapuntally convincing, although I would say that these are contrapuntally convincing-ish, and safe, in that you're not gonna, they're specifically designed to avoid dissonances. So what I'm focusing on a little bit, and I'm not sure, maybe I shouldn't talk about it too much because I'm trying to prepare something for publication at the moment, is the idea that, as described by Olio, if you remember that hour ago or so, when he talks about all these people hearing what's going on and changing their pattern, changing their idea, changing their model. Yeah, this one, exactly. The idea that singers, my impression is that a lot of the time, singers were singing counterpoint above a cantus firmus, basically using all of the rules of counterpoint, but without much consideration for the other people doing the same thing at the same time, creating what sounds like a fairly cacophonous experience. Tinctoris, for example, says this explicitly, that when singers are improvising, he uses the phrase cantare super librum. I think it's maybe even the first, certainly the first example of that phrase in a theoretical source. He says that all of the singers are only required to be concordant with the tenor, with the plain chant, and not necessarily concordant with each other. Where, as opposed to res factor, perhaps you could say composed polyphony, where of course the singers need to be concordant with all the other voice parts as well. So this is something I've been exploring quite a lot, this idea of essentially people doing free counterpoint at the same time on a cantus firmus. And I've included a little example from a live concert I did a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
It was in a festival for improvised music in Lausanne in Switzerland. And it was myself, this little example is myself, a friend of mine who's a keyboard player primarily, but is really a wonderful contrapuntalist, if you can say that. And another friend of mine is singing the Cantus Firmus. So I've included the recording, but also a transcription of it, so we can talk about it a little bit as well. So this is the notation we sang from. It's from a serum gradual, the liturgy associated with England during this period. And it's an Alleluia. We sang it on the repeat of the Alleluia. And you can look at this, and basically looking at this, we generated the other voices on it. So this is what we saw, and then the modern score you just saw, that you just brought up on your screen, is what we sang from it.
Okay, so I'll just hit play and we'll see what happens.
Go for it.
Oh, again. This music is so good.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Where has this been all my life?
So there are a couple
Incredible.
of interesting things to talk about here. So first of all, you can see I've even highlighted them in red. We're both just looking at the plain chant, which appears here in the lowest voice. Yeah, exactly. We're both just looking at that manuscript. And our improvisations, and this was truly improvised in the festival, it's a live concert recording, hence the slightly weird moments every now and again. The improvisations are really just in relation to that. However, that's not quite true. As you can see, we imitate each other quite a lot. I took the lead on this one. Beforehand, we tended to say, okay, I'll start this one and you start the next one. So I tended to open phrases, and then my colleague follows a little bit later. But basically, we're creating as elegant polyphonic lines above the Cantus Firmus as we could in the moment. And the result is, as Tinctorius says, sometimes we aren't consonant with each other. And it was quite a difficult experience to do this in real time. Of course, the majority of dissonances you find are between the fifth and the sixth, because above a Cantus Firmus, that's the only really option you have for dissonance. But of course, you find, as you heard in Banchieri described, the strange octaves and fifths. There are some very strange octaves and fifths here. I think I'd be very upset with my counterpoint.
Strange? What was strange about that? Was great.
Is that bar 10, or are my eyes deceiving me? You see that G to A? That is a strange
Oh,
octave.
come on, strange.
Yeah.
And that was just mind-transporting, soul-transporting music. Fantastic. Strange. I mean, this is unbelievable. Very nice, very nice.